You're all set.
Hello and welcome. I'm Becky with Malvern Books. We're very happy to be with you this evening for another installment of Austin Community College's Creative Writing Department's Literary Coffeehouse and Open Mic. Our host tonight is A.R. Rogers, who teaches creative writing at ACC. Featured writer tonight is Raul Garza. Also joining us is Prudence Arsenault, the head of the ACC Creative Writing Department. I'll just be introducing A.R. and then we'll move right into the program. A.R. Rogers is a poet, first-generation student and former ACC student. A.R. currently teaches at ACC's Ascender program with Free Minds, a Clemente course in the humanities. And in addition to teaching new academic writers, she's taught creative writing with Logos Poetry Collective, Badger Dog Creative Writing Camps, and Upward Bound. She has an MFA in creative writing and a BA in English from Texas State, an AA in creative writing from Austin Community College. She has been published in Juke Joint, Permafrost, North Dakota Quarterly, and was shortlisted for the River Heron Review Poetry Prize. A.R., please take it away.
Thank you so much, Becky. I appreciate that. Well, as I was just saying before we got started, that you could be doing anything else on this chilly Monday night. And I'm just really honored that you chose to hang out with us for about an hour and honor a local writer. But also you're making this time for yourself to just quiet your mind and be still and focus on writing, which is probably a thing that you love if you're here. I hope that you are liking our very sudden, very abrupt turn into winter. But if you're not, on nights like this, you're probably very glad that the coffee house is on Zoom for now. We were just chatting before we admitted everyone into the room, and I didn't realize this until yesterday. So this is my PSA before we get going. Y'all, Thanksgiving is next week. Thanksgiving is next week. I just need you to sit with that. So you do with that information what you will. If you are new here, I'll turn it over to our featured reader here in just a few minutes. Right after that, I will lead a Q&A, but I don't want to be the only one talking. I don't want to be the only one asking questions. So at that point, I will encourage you to also drop questions in the chat so that we can have more of a dialogue. After that, we will have an open mic space here in the last 10 minutes or so. If you want to read in the open mic, you can let us know now. You can let us know then. Just drop your name in the chat and tell us you want to read. If you do want to read, you'll have about a 2-minute space to do that. And just because I need to say it, I think all work, all writing has an audience and a place, but this is not the place for work that includes abuse of humans or animals, hate speech directed at any group of people, or graphic depictions of violence or sex. So before I introduce our featured reader, Prudence, do you have anything that you'd like to say? If not, that's totally fine. We can just move on.
Thank you all for being here. And also mark your calendar for the 12th of December for our next coffee house. We do this monthly, and so we want to make sure that this is a creative space for readers, writers, for listeners. So please connect with all of Creative Writing Department social medias, and that was incorrect, social media, and you'll always know what we're doing. And please come hang out with us.
Thank you, Prudence, who is the chair of the department here at Creative Writing. So if you have any questions about the program, the department, classes, Prudence got you covered. All right, so I'm going to introduce our featured reader, the moment we've all been waiting for. Raul Garza is a Latino playwright who tells stories that resound with authenticity and a sense of place. He boldly explores the intersection of popular culture and cultural identity, and incorporates music, spirituality, and the power of nostalgia into work that spans time and location. When not writing, Raul vibes on kundalini yoga, devours pop culture, and travels beyond his means. Raul, I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to read for writers. That's something I don't get to do too often. And I really applaud the program and the creativity that y'all share. My assignment in sharing is to give you a taste of the iconic, what I find resonant, and what sticks with me. So the way that I'm going to do that is to share 4 really distinct points of view, four really distinct characters from four different pieces. So we're going to meet folks at different stages of life in different parts of the world who want different things. And we'll share that. So the first piece that I'm going to read from is from what started as a little Frontera Fest short piece called My HEB, which is now a full-length piece called My HEB. And in this play, very distinct folks who you might encounter at the HEB cross paths. And the scene I'm going to read is where we meet Loretta, who is a traditional, maybe 60-something longtime customer of HEB with some strong opinions. So we open the scene, Loretta enters, and she's pretty appalled by her surroundings. Jesus Christ, in a sidecar, somebody ought to sell tickets. Times where you looked forward to the week's marketing. See a neighbor or two or Pastor Raymond on a Friday morning if you came early enough. Catch up with Wanda and Doreen, the cashier ladies. Don't you think they weren't keen to every bit of, well, things not just anybody knew. It was spotless then. Used to joke with Carson, the stock boy. Nice boy, a little touched, I think, that I could see my reflection in those shiny linoleum tiles. People weren't in such a rush then. They'd stop and say hi, maybe ask about the Little League or the PTA. People cared. I find it fascinating how you insist on living in the past, Becky says. Some would go so far as to say you're clinging to it, she sighs, flaunting a barely attained psychology degree I paid for. Change is part of life, and once you accept that, well, then that changes everything. Yep, that's my Becky. I hate to say it, Mom. Actually, she loves to say it. But you're romanticizing the past, and not in a healthy way. Like she knows healthy. Married twice in 10 years, that one. Kids shuffled back and forth like sacks of potatoes. Speaking of which, I do need to speak to the manager about the increasing mealiness of the red potatoes. It's just not acceptable. Becky, bless her heart, tried my best to raise that one right. Girl Scouts, Y-Teens, music ministry. Oh, she had a lovely singing voice. And wouldn't you know it, the child uproots herself to go study psychology at Loyola University, as if any person could escape that denizen unscathed. Healthy, my foot. And if we're talking healthy, what's healthy about the aisles in complete disarray by 11 a.m.? Or underage, unsavory types storming the beer shelf like a herd of wild buffaloes? It's a shame and a sin. Oh, but this very store used to have the loveliest displays. So bright, so cheerful. You couldn't help but stop and admire those perfectly balanced pyramids of canned soup. You wouldn't dare take one, though. It's just part of the experience. The produce department was smaller then, but tidy, with a nice greengrocer who knew precisely which golden melon was perfectly ripe. Mr. Bellars was the butcher, not Chucho or Chacho or some hung-out wet degenerate who doesn't know his T-bone from his funny bone. Don't think I haven't tried speaking to the management about that one. Even written letters to HEB headquarters. Deaf ears. Little Minnie, my Leonard's youngest, she's 5 now, and just as cute as a button, but Lord, did she ever inherit her mother's unfortunate gap teeth, not to mention chubby knees. Well, little Minnie came shopping with me, and I swear the child liked to have seen Satan himself when the butcher stepped out from the little plastic bubble to set out the packages of ground beef. These frightful arms plastered stem to stern with more tattoos than a ship of drunken sailors. Right there for God and all creation to see. Look away, little Minnie, I said, just look away. Mom, that's the way of the world, Becky tells me. The way of her world. Like a body's just supposed to accept a statement like that without thinking, Maybe it's that very philosophy that landed you and Edna Gladney home for troubled girls at 17. Lord knows where I went wrong with that one. They do still have the best produce here, fresh and dewy, and well, maybe that's the one thing that hasn't changed all that much. And you can forgive them if they get a little too exotic for the more traditional among us, what with their arugula this and organic that. They call that progress. Entree and 2 sides been good enough for me long these 60 odd years. Been cooking since I could reach a stove, and it ain't all been fun and games like that Paula Deen would have you believe. I say they ought to give medals for stretching $1.09 ways to Sunday just to put real food on the table and not have your kids rooting around for frozen food, loose meat, or some gristly rotisserie chicken that comes in a box. That's not food. That's trash. And it's trashy. There, I said it, people are trashy. And I'm not judging, but when you come to this country, you best come not expecting a handout. You best come dressed in actual shoes and crisp blouses that keep those nightmarish tattoos private like they should be. You best come with common decency not to let your kids run up and down the aisle screeching in Spanish and carrying on like this was some kind of, I dare not even say. I mean, this is the HEB. The HEB. End scene. So I think we can all relate to that place. And from there, we're going to journey a different time and a different space to a brand new piece called Roger Love, a Gen X Indulgence. This is a very wordy and introverted piece based on David Foster Wallace, a very well-known author and very prolific author, and his obsession or his fandom with the tennis icon Roger Federer. So it's a story about a writer's fixation on another great. And there's a fictitious character based on David Foster Wallace. And in this scene, one of the earlier scenes in the play, he reflects back on his connection, which is his childhood tennis years and geekdom in the Midwest. And so this is a middle-aged writer named Jerome reflecting on that part of his life. It creeps up slowly, without fanfare. You, smallish boy. Funny thing about humans, Coach Linden says, they don't move in a straight line. Like you're supposed to understand that. Unpredictable, the old man continues. Some sprout up early. Pretty philosophical for a tennis coach, don't you think? Some just ripen on the vine a little longer. He was one to mix the metaphors. I think 1987 could be your year. Remember, every dog has his day. Case in point. And what's strangest of all is he's right. 10. You're the smart kid with a paper route and the spelling ribbon. The kid saving up for a racing style 10 speed, just like Greg LeMond's. Teammates call you the wizard because you have the uncanny ability to predict where the next shot's going to land. That and 10-year-olds are really into Lord of the Rings. The wizard is just fine. 11, still the smart kid with a paper route, proud owner of said 10 speed, christened the machine for your automatronic ability to return shots with soul-crushingly consistent pace, that being no pace, in precisely the same place, that being the geographic center of the baseline, regardless of the weather, surface, or opponent. 12, smart kid, paper route bordering on empire building, not tall, not tall. You stand on the far left end of the second row for the class photo with the girls and that one Asian kid. You mastered the wind, Zephyros in a Sears brand members only jacket. You can read it, interpret it, absorb it, harness it, withstand it. While overachievers overhit, underspin, rush the net, panic, you withstand it. You don't hit through it, you hit into it, fully trusting the gusts others consider sinister fortune wreckers to deliver your spaghetti-armed backhands to annoyingly deep destination, rendering opponents utterly helpless. Mailman, they call you. You deliver in wind, rain, sleet, and dark of night. 13. First kiss comes in a post-whippet spin the bottle game behind them all. By force of will or gravity, heck, maybe physics, the bottle lands on an unsuspecting Kim Gall. Kim, your stomach unknots. Art geek on word geek. Outsider on outcast. You slink into the closet for your inaugural, you don't even know what. That's how beautifully clueless you are. You both are. 7 minutes in heaven bolts by like 7 seconds as she confesses her wildest dream of art gallery fame in Manhattan. Someday. And you're not that specific. And she's okay with that. And she smiles through concertina wire orthodontics, and you jot her forever name on your paperboy tennis hack book nerd heart. You underline it. 14, and the body decides to stop, as in to not grow, as in to draw a line in the cheap American clay, not the fine powdery carpet legends glide on, legends like Borg, Higueras, Gonzalez, not Connors. Back to the clay, the non-clay, the line in the clay, as in no más. Despite kindly but dismissive cues from Dr. Springer, who looks with grandfatherly disappointment at your testicles during your annual physical, or Coach Linden, who hand-wrings over his undersized and overmatched boy interrupted, despite their lack of vision, you see the bigger picture, that angles, not brute force, equal power. You prove them wrong, relentlessly. Pythagoras, they call you now. You are reborn. Crush is not the word to describe your victory against the region's number 2 single player. A 6'3" farm boy with a serve that can blaze paint off the tee, imposing mid-court game and fear-inducing volleys. No, not crush. Maybe, betraying the writer's lexicon of Florida or Merrick underdog analogies, flummox is more fitting. One boy playing like a boy against a boy trying to not play, rather battle, trying to battle like a man at war. Not a boy playing a game on a dusty, wind-blown court just beyond a sea of cornfields. Boys play games. This is just a game. And I say that as a compliment. Okay, but the match, yeah, that. You are not intimidated by his stature, his hirsute physical dominance, his legion of fans. I am the Worcestershire sauce to your Chex Mix, you silently chide your skeptical teammates as the outcome rests on your racket. Salty, unnoticed, but indispensable. The opposing crowd taunts as testosterone-fueled ground strokes pin you back to a court position not unlike Siberia, one you're warned to avoid at all costs, one you happen to love, one where you do your best work, your best floating, actually. You are floating. You're a floater. You're floating from cannon-like shot to blistering volley, tossing them back casually, like a kindly neighbor tossing an errant football back over the fence. Not graceful, intuitive, even purposeful, just floating. And as you float, he crumbles. Implodes, really. He's actually going to cry. The match drags on like a death march now, and it creeps up slowly. So slowly you almost don't see it. That moment, your finest moment. End scene. On the other side of the world is the setting of a brand new play called El Nido, which is a beautiful beach resort in the Philippines where Vietnam soldiers would go on their leave. And this play is about a Viet Cong soldier who returns to occupy or haunt a veteran. And in this scene, we meet Fung in an underground tunnel where he's awaiting someone to fall prey to the booby trap above. And for those not familiar with the Vietnam War, Viet Cong are the enemy of the Vietnamese allies and the Americans. And this is fun. The lights slowly move from a very low cave-like presence. And they come up just enough where we can see him, and he's at a wood table arranging some flowers. C'est plaisant, d'accord? Un peu sombre, vrai. Ici, les flots montent vite. Ils boivent l'air, c'est dangereux, je sais. Mais il y a certains sacrifices qu'il faut accepter. The French were here first. First, and that's how they like to describe it. The cultural carnage of French colonization, there's a whole other war for that. There's always a war. But do know that's where these came from. Tunnels. How long can man survive on coffee and baguette? That does seem to be the question. He hears a faint creaking sound. That, grasshoppers. Yes, they make a sound for their mates, risking all for love, well, maybe for protection, risking all for connection. But back to the French. What did we learn from them? Aside from Salut Marie and Crème Caramel, we learned that nobody wins a war. And when you teach a people that, well, nothing on this earth is ever truly scary again. Nothing above earth. A gentle but persistent rumbling sound. That frightened elephant, half, sounds suspiciously like thunder, but elephant. War is hell on animals too. Maybe even more so because they didn't ask for it. They avoid confrontation, hunt for their survival only. They shared this space even though we came without asking. They coexist so long as we stay away from their nests, watering holes, mating grounds, offspring. And if we don't, well, they can get aggressive. Wouldn't you? Scratchy sound above. That, just the wind, branches, clusters of moss, stray rice stalks that shook loose on the bumpy road from Mekong to Saigon. Then wandering with the wind until, who knows? These tunnels traverse thousands of miles, thousands, beneath the most treacherous, logic-bending, savagely pristine, impenetrable, homey stretches of soil and flora and water and creatures in creation. From here, an abandoned soldier can steal a few hours of cover, a few thin breaths of oxygen, a few moments of prayer. Yes, we pray. God does not belong solely to those who proclaim their righteousness. Remember that. Try to remember that. Sound of pattering. Those footsteps, Vietnamese, soft, barefoot, each delicate heel tap an apology to the sacred earth violated by this uninvited human intrusion. There are roads for that. They wind down or around or not at all, these tunnels. They seduce, they deceive, they remain hidden in plain sight. We are enemies, to the death, blood enemies. I hate the Vietnamese more than their white co-conspirators. I hate them in ways you can only feel for a brother or sister who sides against you. Someone who knows your vulnerability, your delight, your shame, who knows you. Sound of frantic pattering. They know better. Some. They know what awaits the careless footfall unlucky enough to plunge into my world. Pitfalls, booby traps, poison bamboo spikes, torture. Even worse than Western journalists describe, even more deadly. But the mind plays tricks. The soul plays tricks. So step into my parlor, righteous one. Much more inviting than the mosquito-infested jungle, much more secure than the baboon-crawling forest, much less deadly than the crocodile-ridden delta. Footsteps approach. One can't hide his excitement. Footsteps move away. He's disappointed. We're divided by the West, which makes us enemies, because they sold their souls. To those who would say anything to acquire them, do anything, They think that's winning. When you enter, and you will, whether by accident, delirium, or misguided bravery, we will change the story together. Sound of thumping steps. That footsteps. American. Controlling, they think, but obviously not. Overfed, reckless, not waiting, pretending to, not listening, incapable of that. They crush the earth. No apologies. They stagger. Who put that there? Nobody. They bolt. Where did that come from? It grew here 1,000 years ago. They retreat. This place is uncivilized. Thank you. They return then. And voila. End scene. And I'll close our time with a scene that I really love and relate to from my free bird of my library, which is Confessions of a Mixed Patriot, in which a very Americanized and American identifying Mexican American traces and searches for roots deep in Mexico, and in this case, in the city of Zacatecas. And his name is Samuel. And in this scene, he enters the beautiful centro of the colonial town. So I'm walking a few blocks behind La Parroquia, and like every day, there's this little raggedy ass boy, just a wisp of a kid, maybe 7 years old. His name is Sostenes, I find out, and he has a brother and a sister and wishes with all his being that he had a PlayStation 3. And I don't have the heart to tell the kid that PlayStation 3 is like so 12 years ago. I watch him play, pausing a few minutes every day on my walk. It feels good. The comforting chaos you see at every turn. Kids hurtling through twisted callejones, then magnetically zapped back to the metal front door of their modest casitas, just as Mama calls them in for dinner. And they play some messed up games too, kind of like a hybrid, kick the can, capture the flag, blindman's bluff, red rover. It's a mess. Sostenes is not into winning. I like that. I want to figure out how to tell him to not be about winning, because there's more to life than winning. I should know. I will tell him that there's more to life than winning. Mental note. So I'm walking, and on this particular day, I just linger a little longer than usual, maybe just a few seconds, or 20 loud dog barks in Mexican equivalency. Sostenes' mom is at the door. She smiles as she watches him race home. Then her smile softens a little, and she slowly turns her head to face me. She's looking me right in the eye. Her soft smile is the sweetest thing I've seen in days, all maternal and nurturing and pure. Her eyes drop. She turns to the door, and with a quick glance over her shoulder, I'm invited into the casita. My heart is racing. I pause, but how can I not? Why would I not? Sostenes pulls back one of the mismatched chairs behind the place already set for me. His brother Benito slouches in, tugging Sister Luz. Abuela emerges from the kitchen with Mom, and they set 2 platters on the table. One with strips of grilled beef floating in a red chile sauce, the other with shredded cabbage, col, green chiles, and dark green wild spinach. Luz dashes into the kitchen, returning with a toalla wrapped around a stack of tortillas. They serve me first, a disproportionate amount. When all plates are full, we pause for a blessing. They wait. Feeling all eyes on me, I scoop a healthy spoon of the guisado and lift it to my mouth. It is so good. The red chile leads the way to the beefy broth and then lingers behind, making sure you know who's boss. It might be the heat, the picante, the relief, but for some reason, a tear wells up and escapes right here, just rolling along shamelessly, carrying the weight of my dumb world. The kids stare. Then a stern maternal warning has them all buried in guisado and tortillas. And soon laughter hangs in the air right next to the cooking smoke. And then I'm walking back on the callejon that leads to the centro. This time it's me who turns to glance over my shoulder, catching the eye of Sostenes' mom, standing with the two little ones at the doorway, their arms wrapped around her hips. And I think, dang, if she hasn't figured it all out. Why can't I? No. When can I? End scene. Thank you much, y'all. I look forward to talking and visiting.
Wow, thank you so much, Raul. I feel like we just got a masterclass in character development. So my first question is, and as I ask these questions, remember, I really want this to be a dialogue, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat. In playwriting, you are writing in almost exclusively dialogue. And I think no matter what genre you're writing in, dialogue is hard. So I'm hoping that you can speak to crafting believable and also culturally relevant dialogue and the kind of work that goes into that.
You know, the best trick and process for me is listening. So my characters talk a lot. I'm not a big talker, but I'm a big listener. And that's because everyone is fueling another channel, another moment, another voice. And I think the way that I listen to dialogue, once I outline a character, and I usually have them write a letter to themselves. This is an exercise I do. Then when I'm in a situation, I can hear them responding in their voice, and that's what I write down. So I listen to them and I just channel what they say. And then I go back and I try to edit and clean that up into dialogue. I like dialogue a lot because it is very responsive and reflective, and because there's so many inflection points that we as writers can either highlight or move away from or step into. So I think it's, you know, probably the most fun and the greatest privilege of writing plays is to write dialogue. And that's why it was hard to find some little bits to share in this time frame. But I'm happy to talk more about dialogue or answer questions or thoughts about that from anyone.
Do you have any favorite places that you like to go listen and eavesdrop?
So I like to be out of my comfort zones. So I'm not really good at having the same place because I like to not know what to expect. So if I'm somewhere, and I also don't like to listen to music when I write, especially dialogue, because it brings up association. Every song brings up an association for me of a place or an interaction or a blah, blah, blah. And that seeps in. So that's a no-no. I like places with ambient sound. So random, it can be the park, it can be the place next to the central market, it can be the line at where you get your driver's license. I think all these places that we're stuck in are at the discount tire where you're there for 2 hours. That's where you hear the dialogue that's gonna come up in your place. And for cultural relevance, that's how people say it is how it gets on the page. So if I try to not give them heightened language or make them smarter than me or the audience, and I live with that.
Yeah, that really comes through in your characters. So Prudence has dropped a question for you in the chat. She says that her students are often trying to decide on the where to start, the where of the story. So does conflict of the setting come first for you? Or does the conflict between characters come first? And how do you navigate between those two?
That's a great question. I love both. And I usually imagine the character in a context of discomfort, and I let it grow from that into a situation or a string of situations. I do not typically say, I want to write a play about this place and then populate it. I am more likely to say, gosh, imagine if a 16-year-old runaway was in Louisville, Kentucky. And that's when, from that first crisscross is where everything comes from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think on that note, a lot of our new writers, the impulse is to create characters that or characters that you see around you, or even model a character after yourself. But a lot of your characters, most of your characters, are people who are very unlike you, perhaps even people that you would not enjoy spending time with in the real world. And so I'm wondering, how do you find empathy for what you might deem as an unlikable character?
I love these questions. This is, I enjoyed finding a couple of antagonists for this reading, a couple of folks who kind of steer the other way of what I wish they would. I find empathy for them by listening to them, by letting them have their say. And they kind of dig their own grave in my plays by the way they speak to others, their word choices, the expressions, the things that seep in that tell us what's important in their life. But I definitely give them their fair share. And I also enjoy giving them some of the best lines and letting them have some of the punchiest replies and retorts if it's an exchange. So I let them, again, dig their own grave.
That's great. And that's really beautiful that you create that sense of empathy by letting them talk, letting them have that space. I think that's really helpful for me as a writer. Thank you for sharing that. So we've got,
as writers also, like Loretta. I love Loretta. But because I feel like I've known Loretta my whole life, she was my next door neighbor when I was 4 years, so I kind of know that there's more to her than what she puts out there. And so I can have empathy in that way as well. So.
Yeah, no, Loretta is definitely the character that inspired that question. I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but Loretta, I just hear my mother talking when Loretta. I think we all know Loretta. Yeah. So we have a couple of student questions in the chat. So Elizabetta is wondering, she's been told that her characters engage in blow by blow dialogue. How do you avoid that kind of exchange?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to interpret it blow by blow as tit for tat. Like,
yes. Mm-hmm.
I let the conversation unfold organically. So I don't go left, right, left, because when are we ever in a conversation where it's I speak for 14 words and then you get to speak so people rant, people go off tangents, people take a moment to consider it and to laugh, people have inner thoughts. I do it by almost like musically, when the phrase is over, then the next person, then you let the person in. When they take a breath, like in music, when you take a breath, the next phrase begins. And if the scene ends up 70-30, that's how it ends up, because the 30% that Loretta's counterpart says may be equally heavy as the 70%. Some characters just talk more than others. So how do you not engage in it? Is you listen to the conversation and you don't keep score.
That is so good. Yeah, I think that a lot of us who are writing dialogue in any genre really feel that need to let each character have their own place, have their own rightful place. But yeah, that's not how it is when we interact with each other. Someone often is taking more airtime than someone else. So another student question, Andy Lucia is wondering, how much research is required to properly write about a time that you don't currently live in?
That's a great question. So I think of it as like a sliding scale. 0 is required to start the process. So don't use this as an excuse to start writing your play about the Middle Ages. Start writing it. As you research it, you will, and you do need to do a significant amount of research to understand. You don't want to have anachronisms and have them saying, well, shit fire, and it's like 12 the year the Magna Carta was signed. So mean, do your due diligence there, read things from that era, and then find a great dramaturg. Like, don't put it all on yourself. So find a great partner, great dramaturg in your cohort that can help with that. But it's time well spent. So it shouldn't, I'm making sure to address this as, this is not a barrier. This only makes your play stronger. So invest the minimum time it will take to get you to write the first word, and then research as you go.
That's so helpful. Yeah, I think we often do see any kind of research as a barrier, as something that we need to fully understand. We need to know the thing inside and out before we can even begin hitting the page. But I think that's a much more like measured approach to do it as you go. Don't let that stop you.
Right, for your audience also. So like the play that I'm currently writing is about the Vietnam War. That's a complex story it began 40 years before and still lingers. And so wrapping your head around these generational, monumental topics, you can't cover it in the play anyway, but you do need to be informed enough to have the conversations that happen in your play. So I'm excited that you're writing something from another time. So do it.
So this next question, it is like the burning question that I have. So if I write a couple poems and I give a reading, I am maintaining a lot of control over that work. I wrote them, I'm delivering them. You're hearing it from my mouth. It's my baby, and no one else gets to have it. But I feel like as a playwright, that's not the world that you live in. You create the thing, and then you have to turn it over to actors, to the director. So many other people are going to put their hands on the thing that you have made. And I'm just hoping you could speak to that experience.
Sure. The most liberating and the most wonderful feeling is turning that over and watching someone else turn it into art, turning your words into art. And then when you do that, you get to feel it all anew. You get to hear the sighs and the laughter and the cries. So this is a very practical way that I talk myself out of over attachment to them, is I get to start something new when I get it's like when you get something off the stove, you get to put something else new on there. So I say release them. Directors and designers will bring so much more between the lines that you didn't even know you had put there subconsciously. And that's the reward. It's the icing on the cake of what we're doing, y'all. So let these plays go, let them soar. It's a joy to read them. It's a joy to table work them, but when it's time to get them up and on their feet. So that also, the next question is, how do you refine, or how do you respond to things in process? How open are you to that? I happen to be someone who really, really appreciates and tries any advice or any opinion that someone has before just saying no. Oh, this is the precious final version of it. There's some really, really great things that come from the process of sharing it and rehearsing it and working it. So does that help?
Yeah, I think it does. What I hear you saying is that even though the work was done or entered a state of doneness at some point, that it's still a collaborative, like living, breathing thing. And that's really helpful for writers like me who are control freaks, to let someone else bring themselves to the text. So Prudence has another question in the chat, and I was also kind of wondering this. So many people, so many of our students and so many people in our broader community are bilingual. Those languages are most often English and Spanish. And so can you talk about incorporating both of those languages into your plays and why that's such an important choice? And Prudence is particularly wondering, what is your kind of response to people who may not know both of those languages?
I love incorporating other languages if that's the way the character lives and breathes and speaks. And I prefer context and response to any kind of translation or paraphrasing of what they just said.
Mhm.
When you think about how you receive a play as an audience, if you couldn't walk out of the play and quote the play, you can't remember the words anyway. So I encourage folks who are writing in multiple languages to be clear on the emotion and the response when you use that other language. It should be as clear as if it was in the dominant language or if it was in English. And that's the litmus test I use. So if my character says, siéntate ahí, and then the person says, oh, I wouldn't have them say, oh, you want me to go sit over there? I would have the conversation move naturally into, okay, it looks comfortable. And you're figuring it out. And I think it draws you into the work more. So I don't know if that's a good academic or practical way to do it, but otherwise you're putting words in people's mouths. Don't do that. So try it contextually. Other plays that I have folks who speak only one language, and the responses of the other characters indicates what they were saying and meaning. And it's really about what's underneath the words. So we get really attached to our beautiful words when we write plays, and I couldn't change we love it. We're like, that sentence, and then you'll meet with the director, like, oh, why don't we just cut these? Okay. So this is a good time to start practicing that. But use your skills in other languages to just make these scripts flower and come to life in ways that someone who didn't know that language could never do. Just don't leave me wondering. That's all I ask.
That is really excellent advice, to just let that conversation unfold organically. And I think in doing that you're trusting your audience. You're saying, hey, audience, I believe that you are sophisticated enough to come along with this, even though I'm not putting a direct translation in one of my characters' mouths.
Right.
I believe in your intelligence. Yeah. I'm curious if you write in other forms, and if you do or did, how does that influence your playwriting?
Gosh, I write in any form that I can. And so most daytimes I write for the world of advertising and marketing. So I write, which actually helps me condense my thoughts. So I write things as short as headlines or native articles, things like that. I love the format of short story. And I think that's just the trickiest and most artful and just most wonderful expression. And that's an aspiration I have, is to spend more time and have more works to show for that. I've written a novel, and I'm okay with that format as well, but playwriting and short stories are really the passion area. I also wrote a feature for Men's Journal about the shortest marathon in the world, the 0.5K Bernie, Texas marathon.
I do not know about the shortest marathon in Bernie. Of course, it's in Bernie.
Yeah, smoking was allowed, and there was beer and donut stops along the 0.5K.
Yeah, I can get on board with all of that. Well, can we find that piece online?
And you can. I can send you a link, but I think you can probably look at 0.5K Bernie Men's Journal. You'll find it.
Okay, I'm gonna find it. Well, I just have one more question for you. Austin, as most of us know, maybe some of us don't know, Austin has a robust theater and playwriting community. And for students who are wanting to get more involved in those worlds, where do you recommend that they plug in? Who can they connect to?
Scriptworks is a great place to start. Scriptworks is a community of playwrights. I see Pablo and maybe some others who are fantastic writers and have benefited from the process of sharing a finished piece in a safe place, or a short piece, collaborating, taking workshops, things that we all need to do constantly. So Scriptworks is a great community of writers. And I recommend that scriptworks.org. Go to plays, go on Thursdays or Pay What You Wish night or industry night. And just writers are just the worst introverts in the world, me included, but like do whatever it takes to meet one person or two people there. Bookstores, Malvern's a great example of where you can go to some event where you will find offbeat thinkers who are kind of in your tribe. That's a connection, and it just takes one time. I find people really curious when you're in a space and you're writing. They're like, oh, are you writing about mine? Those little weird opportunities. So it's all around you, but there are some structured places to do that.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So ScriptWorks for all of you aspiring playwrights out there. Raul, this has been so lovely. This has been a wonderful conversation. You have really fed me as a writer, so I know that everyone has some takeaways that they're going to take to the page. I just really want to thank you for your time and for honoring us with your presence and your work.
Thank you for those kind words. Thank you for including me. And I'm very reachable and very accessible to writers. I'm happy to go to Epic and have a double, an iced Americano and see what you're working on, or take a read. And I'm happy to collaborate on that as well. So thank you for having me. I'm really, it's an honor to be here, and Austin is so fortunate to have a resource like this.
Well, thanks for that. Well, if any of our creative writing students, if you want to get in touch with Raul, we can facilitate that. Just let us know. So for the next few minutes, as promised,